Lily woke up to the soft warmth of a spring morning, the sun gently peeking through her window. It was the kind of day that called for an adventure, a walk through the park where she could breathe in the fresh air and watch the world come to life. The park near her home was always full of activity. Children laughing, dogs barking, and the distant sound of birds singing. It was a place that felt comforting and safe, a little oasis in the middle of the busy world. After breakfast, Lily grabbed her favorite book and set off toward the park. Her mom had always encouraged her to enjoy the outdoors, and today was no different. As she walked down the familiar path leading to the park entrance, her eyes were immediately drawn to the bright colors of flowers in bloom and the lively green of the trees. The park seemed to hum with the energy of a perfect spring day. She found a quiet spot near the center of the park, where the sounds of playing children and the chatter of families blended into the background. Settling down on a bench, Lily opened her book, but her attention kept drifting. The children nearby were playing tag, and a couple was having a picnic under a tree. The sun was warm on her skin, and a soft breeze ruffled her hair, but despite the peaceful surroundings, something seemed off. Lily couldn't help but notice a dog walking slowly along the path in the distance. At first, she thought it was just another dog out for a stroll, but as it got closer, she saw that the dog was moving with a strange, unsteady gait. The animal's fur, usually golden and shiny, looked dull and tangled. Its steps were slow, almost labored, as though the dog was struggling just to stay on its feet. Something didn't feel right. The dog was dragging behind it a large, bulging bag, which looked completely out of place. It was strapped across the dog's back, with the straps tight against its body. Lily could see that the bag was far too large for the dog, and it seemed to weigh the animal down with every step it took. The dog's pace was slow, and it looked like it was working hard just to move forward. Lily's heart sank as she watched the dog's slow, painful progress. The bag kept shifting awkwardly, making the dog stumble even more. Lily was no stranger to seeing dogs in the park, but she had never seen one struggling like this before. Why was the dog carrying such a heavy load? And why didn't anyone seem to notice? The dog's discomfort was so obvious, but the people around the park were going about their day, none of them stopping to help. Lily couldn't ignore it. She had to do something. She stood up from her bench, her book forgotten, and walked toward the dog. Her curiosity and empathy for the animal led her to take one step after another. As she got closer, she could see the exhaustion in the dog's eyes, its tongue hanging out as it panted heavily. Lily's mind raced. What kind of situation had the dog found itself in? Why was it carrying a bag that clearly weighed so much? With every passing second, her concern deepened. She had to find out. Lily's heart raced as she closed the distance between herself and the dog. With each step, she could see the strain on the animal's face grow more evident. The dog's golden fur, usually so vibrant, was now dull and matted with dirt. His movements were jerky, his body clearly tired from the effort of carrying the weight of the bag. It was a large, bulging sack, the size of a small duffel bag, and it hung from the dog's back like an extra burden. The straps were too tight, digging into the dog's skin, and Lily could only imagine how uncomfortable it must be. The dog's paws dragged across the path, making little progress with each step. It was clear the weight was taking the toll. He moved in short bursts, his body swaying as he tried to steady himself. Lily could see the dog's breath coming in shallow, labored pants. His eyes, usually filled with energy and joy, were now clouded with exhaustion, and his tail hung limply behind him instead of wagging with excitement. Lily quickened her pace, now only a few feet away from the dog. She called out softly, "Hey there, buddy. You okay?" The dog's head turned toward her, his eyes meeting hers for just a second before he lowered his gaze again, almost as if in resignation. His posture slumped as though he was tired of trying to keep going. Lily felt a rush of compassion flood over her. She couldn't just walk away. This dog needed help. She stepped closer, kneeling down to get a better look at the bag. The dog didn't react to her approach, which told Lily that he was too tired to even care about her presence. His entire focus seemed to be on moving forward, despite the burden he carried. Lily gently reached out to touch the bag, running her hands over the rough fabric. It was surprisingly heavy, and she could feel the weight shift as she tried to lift it slightly. The dog didn't pull away, which confirmed just how exhausted he was. She could see that the straps were cutting into his fur and skin, and her heart clenched with sympathy. No animal, no matter how strong or loyal, should have to bear such a load. Looking at the bag more closely, she noticed that it wasn't just a simple sack. It seemed overstuffed, packed with all sorts of items. It looked bulky and awkward, clearly unbalanced, which made the dog struggle even worse. Lily could feel a sense of urgency rising in her chest. She didn't know who or what was responsible for this, but she was certain that the dog needed to be relieved of its burden immediately. She glanced around, hoping to see someone who might know the dog or might be able to help, but the park was filled with people too caught up in their own world to notice the distress the dog was in. Lily's frustration bubbled up, but she quickly refocused her attention on the animal. This wasn't about anyone else. It was about helping this dog right now. Without thinking twice, Lily carefully placed her hands on the straps and began to lift the bag off the dog's back, determined to relieve him of the weight that had clearly become too much to bear. She felt the dog flinch slightly as the straps loosened, but he didn't protest. Slowly, the bag began to shift, and Lily could feel a momentary sense of relief as the pressure lifted from the dog's back. She was too focused on the task at hand to think about anything else. She had to help him. As Lily carefully eased the bag off the dog's back, she could feel the weight of it shift in her hands. The dog seemed to breathe a little easier as the pressure lifted, and for the first time, his pace slowed to a stop. He sat down on the ground with a soft sigh, looking up at Lily with those tired, soulful eyes. His body was still heaving with exhaustion, but there was a sense of relief in the way he sank to the grass. Lily's heart ached at the sight of him, and she instinctively reached out to stroke his head, trying to comfort him. "Good boy," she whispered softly, her fingers gently running through his matted fur. She could tell he was grateful for the break, but there was still a sadness in his eyes that made her wonder what he had been through. What had caused him to carry such a heavy load? And who had put him in this situation? Lily sat down beside him, giving him the space to rest, while she tried to make sense of everything. She looked at the bag in her hands and noticed the bulging, uneven shape of it. The contents inside were clearly too much for the dog to carry. As she adjusted the straps, the bag tipped over slightly, and Lily could hear something inside shift. She froze, her curiosity piqued. What could be in this bag that would make it so heavy? Just as she was about to unzip the bag to see what was inside, she heard a voice from behind her. "Max, there you are, boy." Lily turned around to see a man jogging toward her. He looked out of breath, his clothes a little disheveled as if he had been rushing to catch up. He had a rugged, worn look about him, and Lily could see that he was clearly concerned. His eyes darted to the dog, and then to the bag in Lily's hands. "Max," the man called again, kneeling down beside the dog. He reached out to gently pat the golden retriever's head. "You've been working hard today, huh?" Lily was still kneeling on the ground beside the dog, unsure of what to say. The man looked up at her, his face softening slightly as he noticed the concern in her eyes. "Thank you for helping him," he said quietly, as Max lay down, looking up at both of them. Lily nodded, her voice still soft. "I saw him struggling, and I couldn't just ignore it. What's in the bag? Why is he carrying it?" The man sighed deeply and sat down next to her. "That's Max. He's not just a dog to me. He's my service dog, and he helps me with a lot of things." He paused, his hands trembling slightly as he stroked Max's fur. "I've been struggling for a while. My family and I. We've been living in this area for a few months, and Max has been helping us carry our supplies. We don't have much, but he does what he can." Lily felt a deep wave of empathy wash over her. She had no idea what the man was going through. But it was clear now that Max wasn't just carrying a bag for no reason. He was carrying everything his family needed to survive. Lily couldn't imagine how hard that must be for both the man and his dog. Max, now resting calmly beside the man, lifted his head and gave Lily a look that seemed almost like gratitude. It was as if the dog knew, somehow, that she had stepped in at just the right moment. Lily sat there, absorbing the man's words, her mind racing as she processed the gravity of the situation. Max, the dog, wasn't just any pet. He was an integral part of the man's family and survival. She looked down at the bag, which now lay on the ground between them. The contents were still spilling out, and Lily couldn't help but feel a sense of disbelief as the items began to tumble free from the bag. First, a handful of stuffed toys rolled out, some old and worn, with their seams barely holding together. They were small and soft, the kind of toys a child would cling to for comfort. Then came a few packages of dog treats, their bright colors contrasting with the dullness of Max's fur. They were scattered in a way that suggested the bag had been packed in a hurry, the items tossed in without much thought for organization. But what really took Lily by surprise was what came next. As she peered inside the bag, more items tumbled out. A stack of folded clothes, neatly pressed but clearly well worn. There were shirts, pants, and a few jackets, all in various sizes. At the very bottom of the bag, a couple of blankets spilled out, their edges frayed and torn from too many washes. It was clear these weren't just random items. They were essential to the man and his family. Lily's breath caught in her throat as she continued to examine the contents. There were also cans of food, canned vegetables, soups, and beans, stashed haphazardly in the corners of the bag. These were the types of food that could last a while, a small, hopeful stash of supplies for a family struggling to get by. She knew that these weren't luxuries. They were the bare essentials, the kind of things that made survival possible in times of hardship. As the last item, a half-empty bottle of water tumbled out. Lily's heart sank. She realized that this wasn't just a simple bag of supplies. It was the weight of someone's life, packed into an old, overstuffed bag that had become far too much for the dog to carry. Max wasn't just carrying these things for the sake of it. He was helping to keep his family going, carrying the burden that no dog should ever have to bear. Lily's mind swirled with questions, but most of all, she felt a deep sense of empathy for the man and his dog. She glanced at the man beside her, who had been watching the scene unfold in silence. His expression was one of quiet sadness, but there was also a hint of relief in his eyes, perhaps because someone had finally noticed their struggle. Max, now resting peacefully on the ground, seemed to have taken comfort in the fact that the bag was no longer weighing him down. His breathing had slowed, and he closed his eyes as if he had finally found a moment of peace amidst the chaos. The man reached over and gently patted Max's head again, a look of gratitude and affection in his eyes. Lily felt a pang of compassion in her chest. She couldn't just stand by and do nothing. There had to be something she could do to help, something to lighten their load, even if just for a little while. The sight of the bag's contents was a stark reminder that sometimes even the smallest act of kindness can make a world of difference. Lily sat in stunned silence for a moment, staring at the pile of items scattered on the ground. The reality of the situation was beginning to settle in, and it felt heavier than the bag itself. She had never seen anything like this before. The stuffed toys, the clothes, the cans of food. They were all so personal, so essential. These weren't just things that could be tossed aside. They were the building blocks of a life, a family's fragile attempt at surviving in a world that seemed indifferent to their struggles. Max, now freed from the burden of the bag, was lying on the ground with his eyes half closed, breathing more steadily. Lily glanced at the man, unsure of what to say. She could tell that this wasn't easy for him to talk about, but something told her that he needed to be heard. The man cleared his throat, shifting his gaze toward the scattered items. "I've been on the streets with my family for a while now," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "We don't have much, but Max, he's always been there for us." Lily nodded, her heart aching at the pain in his voice. She could only imagine what he must have gone through, how much he and his family must have endured to survive. "So Max carries all this for you?" she asked softly, gesturing to the pile of belongings. The man's expression softened as he looked down at his dog. "Yeah, he carries the essentials for us. Food, clothes, whatever we can't carry ourselves. He's been doing it for months now." He paused, his hands trembling slightly as he reached out to pet Max's head. "I don't want to put that weight on him, but he insists on helping. He's always been that way, even from the moment I found him. He's not just a dog, he's part of the family." Lily felt a lump form in her throat as she listened. The love and devotion between the man and his dog were undeniable. Max wasn't just helping, he was protecting, providing, doing everything he could to ensure his family's survival. It was heart-wrenching to think that the dog, instead of playing fetch or going for walks, was carrying the weight of survival on his back. "I never meant for him to have to carry so much," the man continued, his voice wavering slightly. "But there are days when it feels like we don't have a choice. Every time we move, every time we go from one place to the next, I need him to help. We don't have a car or a truck. It's just us, Max, my wife, and my daughter. And whatever we can carry, Max helps with." Lily felt a surge of compassion for the family. This wasn't just about homelessness. It was about survival, about love and sacrifice. The dog wasn't just an animal. He was a lifeline, a symbol of resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. The man's eyes met hers, and for a moment, it seemed like he was searching for something in her expression. "I know it must seem strange," he said, "but Max has never let us down. He's always been there, no matter what." Lily took a deep breath, her voice soft but firm. "It's not strange," she said. "It's incredible. What Max is doing, what you're doing, is incredible." She glanced at the dog, who had now rolled onto his back, paws in the air, looking more relaxed than he had all day. "Is there anything I can do to help?" The man's face brightened slightly, the smallest smile pulling at the corners of his mouth. "I appreciate that more than you know. Just knowing someone cares makes all the difference." Lily didn't know what the future held for the man, his family, or Max, but one thing was certain. She wasn't going to let this moment pass without doing something to help. She didn't know exactly how, but she knew she had to act. Lily's heart felt heavier as she listened to the man's words, realizing just how much he and his family were enduring. Max wasn't just a dog. He was the glue holding them together, bearing the weight of their lives with every step. The bags of food, the clothes, the blankets, all of it represented a fight for survival, a struggle that no one should have to face, let alone a dog. The air between them was quiet for a few moments, both Lily and the man processing everything. She kept glancing at Max, who was now resting with his head on his paws, looking more peaceful than before, yet still visibly tired. She wanted to do more, but didn't know where to begin. What could one person do in the face of such a complex situation? The man, noticing the thoughtful expression on Lily's face, spoke again. "I know it's a lot to take in," he said, his voice quieter now, almost as if he were trying to make sense of his own words. "But Max, he's been a part of my family for years. He's always been more than just a dog. He's our protector, our helper, our everything." Lily nodded, understanding the depth of the connection between them. The man wasn't just talking about a pet. He was talking about a companion who had been through everything with him. Max had seen the highs and lows, the moments of joy, and the days filled with struggle. To him, Max wasn't just carrying a bag. He was carrying the burden of a family's hope. "But it's not just the physical weight that gets to us," the man added, his voice softer now, almost apologetic. "It's the emotional weight. Every time we move, every time we have to find a new place to sleep or food to eat, I feel like I'm failing them. Failing Max, failing my wife and daughter. I never wanted to put them through this, but sometimes it feels like we have no other choice. Lily could hear the desperation in his voice, the raw emotion behind his words. It was clear that the weight of their situation wasn't just something they carried in their bags. It was something that weighed heavily on his heart, day in and day out. He wasn't just concerned about survival. He was worried about his family's well-being, about protecting them from the hardships they faced every day. Lily's eyes welled up with unused tears as she thought about the family's struggles. She couldn't begin to fathom the pain and exhaustion that came with living on the edge every day. But she knew that she had to do something, even if it was just a small gesture, something to make their burden a little lighter. I can't imagine how hard this must be for you, Lily said, her voice filled with empathy. But I want you to know that you're not alone. I can help. Maybe I can take some of these supplies to a shelter or somewhere that can help you more. I don't know how, but I'm willing to do whatever I can. The man looked at her, his eyes softening with gratitude. Thank you, he whispered, as though the simple words couldn't fully express how much her offer meant. Just knowing someone cares. That's more than we've had in a long time. It means the world. Lily smiled at him, her heart swelling with a sense of purpose. The situation was far from ideal, but it was clear that sometimes the most meaningful acts of kindness didn't have to solve everything. Sometimes, just offering a helping hand or a listening ear was enough to make someone feel seen, feel valued. As she stood up to gather some of the scattered items, Max lifted his head and gave a soft whine, his eyes fixed on her. Lily bent down to stroke his fur again, her heart heavy with a mix of sorrow and determination. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: she couldn't turn away now. Whatever happened next, she would do everything she could to make sure that Max and his family didn't have to carry their burdens alone. Lily felt a sense of purpose fill her as she began to gather some of the scattered items. She carefully picked up the blankets, folding them as neatly as she could, and placed them back in the bag. It was a small task, but it felt important. As she picked up the dog treats and cans of food, she glanced over at the man and Max, both of whom were watching her with quiet gratitude. The man smiled softly, but his expression was a mixture of both relief and exhaustion. Thank you again, he said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. I never expected anyone to stop and help. Most people just don't notice. Lily paused for a moment, looking up at him. It's hard to ignore something like this, she replied, her voice gentle but firm. Everyone deserves to be noticed. And Max, he's not just a dog. He's part of your family. He shouldn't have to carry all of this alone. The man nodded, his eyes glistening with unused tears. You're right, but he's always been there for us. He's never once complained, never asked for a break. He just keeps going. Lily's heart swelled with admiration for both Max and the man. The bond they shared was undeniable, a bond that went beyond what most people could ever understand. It was one of love, loyalty, and sacrifice. The kind of bond that transcended the ordinary, where both human and animal gave their all to each other without question. As Lily continued to organize the items, she felt a tug on her sleeve. She turned to see a young girl, no older than 6 or 7, standing nearby, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers in her hand. The girl's face was soft with curiosity, and she looked up at Lily with wide, innocent eyes. Lily smiled warmly at the girl, kneeling down to her level. Hi there, she said softly. Those flowers are beautiful. Are they for Max? The little girl nodded shyly, holding out the bouquet toward Lily. I saw Max helping, and I thought he might like some flowers, she said in a small voice, her face lighting up as she spoke about the dog. He looks tired, but he's still helping. Lily's heart melted at the girl's kindness. She could see the same love for Max in her eyes that the man had, a quiet appreciation for the dog's unspoken devotion. That's so sweet of you, Lily said, gently taking the bouquet from the girl's hands. Max will love them. He's been working hard today, hasn't he? The girl nodded eagerly. Yes, he helps people. He's a good dog. Lily smiled and stood up, walking over to Max, who was still lying peacefully on the grass, resting after the burden of the bag had been lifted. She placed the bouquet of flowers beside him, and Max's eyes opened lazily, his nose twitching as he sniffed the sweet scent of the flowers. For a moment, it seemed as though the simple gesture of the flowers had brought a sense of calm to the dog. He nudged them gently with his nose, as if acknowledging the kindness in a way only a dog could. The man watched this with a soft smile, a tear slipping down his cheek. "Thank you," he said again, his voice cracking slightly. "I never expected anything like this. You've really made a difference today." Lily didn't know how much difference she could make in the grand scheme of things, but seeing Max resting peacefully, the weight of his burden lifted, was enough for her. She knew that sometimes, even the smallest acts of kindness had the power to create a ripple effect, to bring a bit of light to a dark situation. "I'm just glad I could help," Lily said quietly, looking down at the dog with a smile. "Sometimes, all it takes is a little bit of love and care to make things better." The man nodded, his expression filled with a mix of gratitude and hope. "Maybe things will get better," he murmured. "Maybe this is the start of something different." Lily couldn't help but agree. In that small moment, in the quiet park filled with flowers and the hum of the world moving on around them, something had shifted. Max was no longer carrying that heavy burden, and the family's hope, however small, had been restored. And maybe, just maybe, that was all they needed to take the next step forward. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting a soft golden glow over the park, Lily stood up, taking one last look at Max, the man, and his daughter. The brief moment of connection had left a lasting impression on her. She had come across a simple act of kindness, but it had turned into something much more. In that fleeting time, a family had been seen, and their burdens, if only for a moment, had been shared. The man stood up too, wiping his eyes, and gave Lily a small, sincere smile. "I don't know what to say," he said quietly. "It's not often that someone shows up when you need it most. We've been through a lot." And he paused, taking a deep breath, as if gathering the courage to speak from his heart. "I never thought a stranger would care, but you did, and I won't forget it." Lily's heart swelled as she looked at him. There was so much gratitude in his eyes, so much emotion that it nearly brought tears to her own. "You don't need to thank me," she replied softly. "I just did what anyone would do. You and your family are not alone." Max stirred beside her, lifting his head and letting out a soft bark as if to agree. Lily smiled and bent down to give him one last scratch behind his ears. "You're a good boy, Max," she whispered, watching the dog's tired eyes brighten as he wagged his tail just a little bit. The little girl, still holding her bouquet of wildflowers, approached Lily with a shy grin. "Do you think Max will be okay?" she asked, her voice full of concern. Lily knelt down in front of her. "I think Max will be just fine. He's one of the strongest dogs I've ever met, and he's got you, your dad, and your mom to take care of him." She smiled warmly at the girl. "You're all going to be okay." The girl's face lit up, and she held the flowers out to Lily. "These are for Max. I want him to feel better." Lily took the flowers gently, her heart touched by the innocent sweetness of the gesture. "I'll make sure Max gets them," she said, her voice filled with tenderness. "Thank you for giving him these." With one final look, Lily stood up and brushed the dirt from her knees. The man, now visibly calmer, reached into his pocket and pulled out a small crumpled piece of paper. "I don't have much," he said, his hand trembling as he handed it to her. "But if you ever need anything, or if you just want to check in on us, here's where we're staying. It's not much, but it's a roof, and we're getting by." Lily took the paper, feeling a sense of warmth in her chest. It wasn't a promise of wealth or a solution to their problems, but it was a reminder that people could still rely on each other, even in the toughest of times. "Thank you," she said, folding the paper carefully and slipping it into her pocket. "I'll be sure to check in. You're not alone." The man's eyes softened with emotion as he gave a small nod, looking at Max, who was now lying down peacefully in the grass. Maybe this is the beginning of something different for us," he said, his voice full of hope. Lily smiled. "I believe it is." As she turned to walk away, Lily glanced back once more. The little family was still there, standing together, their bond stronger than ever. Max, who had been carrying such a heavy burden, now rested in peace, and the man, despite the hardships, seemed to find a glimmer of hope. The world was still a complicated place, full of struggles and challenges, but in that moment, Lily knew that even the smallest acts of kindness could change the course of someone's day, and maybe even their future. She didn't need to solve all their problems, but she had made a difference, and for today, that was enough. As Lily walked away, the weight on her heart felt a little lighter. Sometimes it wasn't about fixing everything, it was about showing up.